sun will never shine. Paranoid anyway, in the subways of your mind.
Habt ihr schon gehört, dass sich die ganze Welt mit aufschaltet und gerade mitschneidet, unser Programm?
A vanished rock band, a plane lost for decades, a mystery supposedly solved after 19 years, according to the internet. But the real story behind all those viral videos is stranger, darker, and far more devastating than any fiction. This isn't a conspiracy theory or clickbait legend. It's the true story of a 17-year search for a ghost song that quietly rewrote how we remember music history, and of a forgotten band unaware the world was searching for them, while YouTube thrives on dramatic tales of lost musicians. The real journey behind Fex's subways of your mind is about relentless curiosity, digital detectives, and the shock of realizing your teenage mixtape has become the internet's most compelling, unsolved musical mystery. The cassette tape that broke the internet. It started with a mixtape, not a cursed relic or a crashed plane, just a teenager hitting record on his stereo in 1984. But this tape would ignite a digital detective story no one saw coming. A mystery that would outlast MySpace, stump Reddit's finest minds, and eventually resurface with an answer no one was ready for. Let's rewind. Wilhelmshaven, West Germany, 1984. A teenager named Darius, 15, music-obsessed, and armed with nothing but a Panasonic cassette deck, sat in his bedroom recording tracks off the radio with his sister, Lydia. The two of them were in sync, like many siblings of the era, carefully timing the record button to snatch songs before the DJ could talk over the intro. That day, something different crackled through the speakers. An ethereal synth riff, a soft male voice, singing, "Like the wind, you came, flying beneath the sun." It sounded like a dream you half remember in the morning. They had no clue what the song was, no title, no band name, no DJ, commentary. Just that haunting tune caught on what would later be labeled Cassette 4. Fast forward to 2007. The internet's golden age of forums, blogs, and early YouTube. Now grown, Darius starts digitizing his old tapes, mostly nostalgia. But one file sticks out, that mysterious synth-pop track from 1984. Music ID apps like Shazam were around by then, but they all failed. There were no lyrics to search, no metadata to trace. It was like the song never existed outside that cassette. He posted it online, hoping someone, anyone, could identify it. That's when things got weird. The song, now dubbed the most mysterious song on the internet, exploded on forums like spiritofradio.net and Reddit's r/tip of my tongue. People obsessed. They ran spectral analysis, deconstructed the vocal frequencies, and even tracked down obscure European DJs from the 80s. Still nothing. One vital clue, though, kept the hunt alive. The synthesizer. Around the 45-second mark, listeners noticed a distinctive electric twinkle, a classic Yamaha DX7. That detail was everything. The DX7, one of the most iconic synths of the 80s, hit the market in 1983. So the song couldn't have been recorded before that. Add the track's production quality, vocal style, and stereo layering, and experts agreed. The song was likely made between 1984 and 1986. It fit the vibe, too polished to be. A home demo, but too obscure for mainstream radio. Like a forgotten gem that fell between the cracks. And yet, no record label, no vinyl, no concert footage. Just a digital ghost with a chorus that refused to leave your head. That's what makes this story so sticky. It's not about fame or fortune. It's about that one memory we all have, locked in analog, that somehow refuses to die. For Darius and Lydia, it was just a quiet afternoon in Germany. For the rest of us, it became the internet's biggest musical cold case. But here's the real twist. The internet didn't just archive the song, it transformed it. A whole subculture bloomed, lost wave. A genre built not on bands, but on vibes and mystery. Fans created full playlists of unknown or half-remembered tracks, each a sonic time capsule. And this song, It, became their anthem. So, how did a random demo, recorded off a local German station, become the internet's white whale? What forces were hiding behind this vanishing act? Was it censorship, obscurity, or just a case of a band that never made it? The internet's forgotten music genre. Move over. True crime. There's a new obsession in town, and it's fueled by songs that don't exist. Welcome to Lost Wave, the digital Bermuda Triangle of music. It is where Shazam fails, Google gaslights you, and Reddit becomes your only hope. But what exactly is Lost Wave? Imagine this. You're sitting in your childhood bedroom in the late 1980s, taping songs off the radio, onto a crusty Maxell cassette. You don't catch the DJ's voice. There's no title, no band name, just a strange, haunting track that feels like a dream. Then, one day, decades later, you remember that song and realize it doesn't exist anywhere online. That is Lost Wave. Born out of pre-internet obscurity, Lost Wave is the unofficial name for a growing collection of songs that somehow slipped through the digital cracks. These aren't just underground tracks. They're phantom recordings, melodies that aired once on regional radio stations in places like Germany, Brazil, or Russia, and then vanished. No record label, no album, no liner notes, nothing. The most famous example? A song known only as the most mysterious song on the internet. It was recorded off a German radio station in the mid-80s by a teenager named Darius. It sounded like a mix between Joy Division and The Cure. Fans described it as eerie, but beautiful. For nearly 2 decades, no one knew who made it. Reddit threads exploded. Spectrograms were analyzed. Synth models from the 80s were studied like crime scene. Evidence. People even tracked down the old radio station DJ, who, shockingly, remembered. Nothing. The mystery turned into an obsession. And it was not alone. Forums like WhatsApp Song have logged over 200 unidentified tracks. Some jazzy, some electronic, some lo-fi garage rock, all with no known artist or origin. These songs are more than curiosities. They're ghosts. They represent an entire genre built around lost memory and cultural entropy. Welcome to Lost Wave, where nostalgia meets internet detective. Work. Other cases followed, like the chilling Everyone Knows That, a spooky 80s synth. Ballad posted to YouTube without a single shred of metadata. Commenters swore they'd heard it in the background of an old VHS tape. Others said it was used in a forgotten horror movie trailer. Still, no trace of its creator. Lost Wave lives in that uncanny valley between analog past and digital present. It's music that should exist, but somehow doesn't. That tension is what keeps people digging. And let's be honest, it is way more fun than binge-watching another rehashed serial killer documentary. So what's the appeal? For one, it is deeply interactive. Fans of Lost Wave are not just listeners. They're digital archaeologists. They trawl cassette archives, reverse engineer accents, and decode radio jingles. One user even wrote a custom neural net to identify vintage reverb settings based on waveform decay. Yep, it's that deep. Could your favorite deep cut become a Lost Wave relic? Or is it already? But here's the kicker. This wasn't just a niche hobby. It became a digital war room with Reddit. Users dissecting regional accents, 80s-era drum machines, and Eastern Bloc FM broadcast schedules. And ironically, one user would crack the case of the most mysterious song on the internet by doing the opposite of what everyone else was doing. They ignored the music entirely. Instead, they tracked down old cassette labels, examined the handwriting, researched brands of tape sold in German electronics stores in the 1980s, and cross-referenced radio show schedules using scanned print archives from Stuttgart libraries. And that's how they found it. The song was called Like the Wind by a short-lived band named Reluctant Stereotypes. The group dissolved before releasing anything officially, just a few demo tapes. One of them ended up in a German DJ's hands, and from there onto Darius's cassette. Now, in their 50s, the band members were stunned that anyone even remembered, and devastated. The rediscovery sparked a surge of bittersweet emotion. For them, it wasn't just a lost song, it was a lost future, a glimpse of what could have been. So yes, the mystery was solved, but the feeling it left behind? That haunting sense of music nearly erased by time. That's the real power of Lost Wave. It reminds us that cultural memory is fragile. One missing label, one forgotten name, and an entire sound can fall into digital oblivion. And yet, thanks to collective obsession, internet sleuthing, and a little bit of luck, Lost Wave keeps pulling. Songs back from the edge. Each rediscovery is a resurrection, a pixelated miracle. The 17-year Reddit rabbit hole. Forget Shazam. The key to solving this mystery wasn't an algorithm, it was a 23-year-old Dutch grad student with a vendetta against dead ends. Meet Marijn, better known online as Marijn1412, a soft-spoken computer science student from the Netherlands, who didn't just stumble across a musical mystery, he obsessed over it. His weapon of choice? Not fancy AI tools or audio forensics, labs, but old-fashioned newspaper clippings, deep archival dives, and a Reddit tab that probably hadn't been closed in 5 years. This wasn't just research, it was a slow-burn thriller powered by caffeine and internet rage. Let's rewind. Back in 2007, someone posted a grainy, low-bit recording of a haunting synth pop, tracked to a German radio message board. No title, no band name, just a vibe. A very retro, very moody vibe. For nearly 2 decades, nobody could find the source. It wasn't on Spotify, Discog, or even hiding in the darkest corners of SoundCloud. Redditors dubbed it the most mysterious song. On the internet, thousands of users tried to crack it. The subreddit r the mysterious song became Ground Zero for internet detectives. They chased dead leads, flagged false positives, and even emailed aging radio hosts. But despite 17 long years of speculation, the artist behind that synth track stayed anonymous until Marine came along. Here's where it gets cinematic. While scrolling through the archives of a local German newspaper called Nordwest Zeitung, Marine spotted something strange buried in a 1984 column. It was a small, almost forgettable listing for a regional music competition called Hörfest. Nothing fancy, just a local event for up-and-coming German bands. But listed among the performers was a name. That sent chills down him. Fex. Fex, a short-lived new wave band that had supposedly vanished. Right after the 80s ended. No discography, no streaming presence, just a footnote in one local contest. And maybe, just maybe, the answer to a mystery that had outlived MySpace. So, what did Marine do? He did exactly what we hoped to do if we stumbled on an unsolved riddle. Wrapped in synthwave. He tracked down the original judges of the contest. He emailed former radio DJs. He even wrote letters to Hörfest organizers who hadn't been active since before Google existed. This wasn't an algorithmic solution. This was one man going full analog in a digital age. And guess what? It worked. Inside the dusty archives of the Nordwest Zeitung, Marine found an audio recording from 1984. Hörfest Finals, where Fex had performed a track called Subways of Your Mind. The melody matched perfectly. Same eerie synth intro. Same mysterious vocal inflection. The song that haunted Reddit for 17 years had finally been found. Not by a company or machine, but by a student who just wouldn't let it go. Now, here's where things get really meta. Fex wasn't some underground legend. They weren't. Ahead of their time or suppressed by the industry. They were just a group of young hopefuls who won one regional talent show, played one song, and disbanded shortly after. Their 1984 victory at das Hörfest was the peak of their fame, and until 2024, literally no one remembered them. Talk about irony. A track that became internet canon, an obsession across forums and think pieces, was essentially forgotten by the very people who made it. And before we dive into the next part of the story, we've got to ask you, could you solve a mystery using newspaper clippings older than your parents? But let's not miss what this whole arc really shows. First, the power of the collective. This mystery wasn't cracked by one person alone. It was built on years of crowdsourced effort. A global Reddit, trail, audio samples, German forums, thousands of man-hours. Marine just happened to be the one who hit the final key on the piano. Second, there's something poetic about how this all ends. FEX, a band that disappeared before the internet even became a thing, accidentally immortalized themselves, not through fame, but through absence. Their only known recording became digital. Folklore. In trying to find them, people gave their one song more attention than it ever got on. Release. And finally, let's appreciate what it says about music itself. Some tracks are catchy, others are viral. But this one, Subways of Your Mind, lingered because it felt haunted. People chased it. Not because it was perfect, but because it felt like a ghost of something important that had been erased. It was raw, weirdly sad, and sounded like it belonged to a movie's credits that never got made. But when Marine finally emailed the band, they didn't believe him. They were confused. They had buried that song and their dreams decades ago. They had moved on, got jobs, raised families, probably traded synths for spreadsheets. So, when Marin reached out, it wasn't a celebration. It was more like reopening a time capsule they had locked away for a reason. But hey, closure hits differently when it shows up 40 years late. Next up, why FEX never released another song, and what happened when they were forced to listen to their past again, this time with the whole internet watching. FEX's devastating truth. In the 1980s, FEX was just 4 kids from Kiel chasing a pipe dream. In 2024, they became accidental legends, and they hated it. It all started with a Reddit DM Michael Hedrick, now 68 and running a modest studio in Munich, received a message from a random user named Marine1412. The guy had been deep diving through dusty digital archives of a Hamburg music festival when he stumbled across a passing reference to a forgotten band, FEX. Curious, he reached out to Hedrick asking if he had anything, literally anything, from those days. Maybe some old recordings, demos, even a photo. Hedrick, surprised but amused, found a few tapes in his storage, some rough recordings from the band's youth. He sent them over, probably thinking that would be the end of it. But it wasn't, because just after that, Marine1412 dropped the bomb. One of the tracks, Subways of Your Mind, was the internet's most mysterious song. The track that Reddit, detectives, music historians, and digital sleuths had been obsessing over for nearly 2 decades. And here it was, sitting in a dusty drawer in Munich all along. Michael immediately called up the others, Norbert Zierman and Tura Rückwart, and the reaction was identical. Total disbelief. Now, to be fair, it's not like FEX had ever made it back in the day. They weren't topping charts. They weren't playing stadiums. They were just another German new wave band trying to catch a break. They'd done a few shows around Kiel, entered a newcomer competition in 1984, recorded a 6-track demo, and dreamed of something bigger. Then, like many high school bands, they dissolved into memory. By the late 80s, FEX was over, forgotten, even by them. And then suddenly, decades later, the entire internet is trying to find them. For most of their lives, they'd moved on. Ture became a music teacher. Norbert ran an auto repair shop. Michael kept one. Foot in the music world with his studio work in Munich. But none of them ever imagined their teenage music would end up at the center of a global mystery. The really weird part? None of them even remembered recording Subways of Your Mind. Not at first. It had been buried so deep in time and tape hiss that when they finally heard it again, it was like listening to a stranger humming. In the hallway of their past, the vocals, the melody, it all came rushing back slowly. It was theirs. They'd written it, played it, and lost it. And that's where the heartbreak really kicked in. Because as the attention exploded, Reddit threads went wild. Fans created animations, podcasts, began dissecting the lyrics line by line. The band had to admit something devastating. The original master tape was gone, completely lost. Not in a drawer, not in a box in someone's attic. Just gone. Maybe erased, maybe recorded over, maybe thrown out during a move sometime in the 90s when no one thought it mattered. All that was left was the grainy radio recording, the version that launched 1,000 internet theories, the audio that started it all. Still, the band tried. To honor the moment, they reunited, performed a stripped-down acoustic version live on German radio, and for the first time since the Cold War era, people were listening to FEX. But here's the thing, they didn't love it. Not in the way you'd expect. See, for them, FEX was a memory, not a career. It was a time capsule of late-night rehearsals, terrible coffee, and those early. Dreams that burn fast and bright, but usually burn out. Being dragged back into that world, into questions, interviews, speculation, felt less like validation and more like a haunting. One of them described it as running into an old flame who wants to rekindle something you'd already mourned and moved on from. They weren't bitter, not exactly, but it was complicated. There's something strange about becoming famous for something you did as a teenager. Something you forgot you even made. It's like someone handing you a time machine with no instruction manual and saying, "Go perform." Except the audience now spans continents, includes people born after you broke up, and they know more about your song than you do. The fame wasn't about them. It was about the mystery, the myth, the puzzle that the internet solved. They were just the answer, the final slide in the presentation. That's what makes the story of FEX so devastating. Because it's not a classic comeback tale, it's not. About old rockers getting a second shot. It's about how the internet can pull ghosts out of the attic and turn them into viral phenomena, and how that can feel more like pressure than pride. And yet, they leaned in. Maybe reluctantly at first, but they leaned in. They dug up whatever tracks they could, remastered what survived, and reconnected as a band. And now, somehow, they're releasing an actual debut album. Not a reissue or a tribute, a real album. And it's coming in July 2025. It's a mix of cleaned-up old recordings and new material. They've written since the mystery cracked wide open. It's the band, now in their 60s, trying to put a proper period at the end of a sentence they never thought they'd finish. It's almost poetic. You start a band in the 80s. You break up. You live a life. Then the digital age grabs a frayed thread from that band and pulls hard. Suddenly, you're back in the studio, people are calling you legends, and you're trying to make sense of a past that refused to stay buried. So, would you reunite your high school band if the internet demanded it? Or would you burn the tapes? Because this isn't just about a song, it's about what happens when the past surfaces out of nowhere and taps you on the shoulder. It's about legacy, unwanted or otherwise, and how, sometimes, the stories we leave behind are bigger than we ever imagined. For FEX, it wasn't about being famous, it was about being found. And once that happened, the choice was simple. Either disappear again, or pick up the instruments and play. They chose to play. And for a few minutes, the entire internet listened. But what happens when the world's applause feels more like an interrogation lamp than a spotlight? The dark side of digital resurrection. FEX's story isn't a triumph, it's a warning. What happens when the internet resurrects a ghost, and the ghost doesn't want to be found? That's where this strange saga starts to feel less like a victory lap and more like something out of an analog horror series. Imagine a mystery so compelling it becomes sacred. A song so obscure that it transforms into a holy grail for online. Detectives. Now imagine solving it, only to realize that maybe, just maybe, you shouldn't have. So, here's what actually happened. The track known only as the most mysterious song on the internet, which haunted Reddit threads and YouTube rabbit holes for nearly 2 decades, was finally identified as Subways of Your Mind by a little-known 1980s band from Kiel, Germany, called FEX. And when the answer dropped, the internet exploded with celebration. Redditors rejoiced, YouTubers rushed to make explainer videos, and Spotify saw a spike in plays. But for the men who made the song, it wasn't a feel-good reunion. It was a digital haunting they never asked for. Here's the part that complicates the fairy tale. FEX didn't consent to becoming legends. And once the sleuths cracked the code, the ethical floodgates opened. A debate broke out across forums, articles, and podcasts. Was the search really about celebrating art? Or was it just curiosity at the expense of someone else's peace? According to Gizmodo, some fans were elated by the reveal, but others began asking harder questions. Did the band even want to be found? Did we take something private and twist it into entertainment? The truth is, lost wave culture, the internet's obsessive hunt for forgotten tracks and musical orphans, isn't always romantic. Sure, on the surface, it's about uncovering hidden gems, but dig a little deeper, and it starts to resemble digital archaeology without permission. We poke around in people's pasts, dig up songs recorded in bedrooms or dingy basements, and treat them like artifacts. That belonged to all of us. But here's the uncomfortable reality. Those songs weren't always meant to be shared, and in this case, they definitely weren't meant to go viral. Even Mixmag pointed out how Fex was taken aback by the attention. In fact, the band had resisted all attempts to commercialize their rediscovered fame. They didn't want merch, didn't want reunion. Shows didn't even want a Spotify revival. The track was uploaded anyway, and for a brief moment, Subways of Your Mind sat there, streamable, searchable, public. But behind the scenes, the band wrestled with what that meant. And for a moment, it almost got pulled. Yes, the song you spent years trying to name was nearly scrubbed from the internet by the very people who made it. Why? Because this wasn't a homecoming. It was a re-exposure. For the band, this wasn't nostalgia. It was intrusion. They'd moved on. One became a teacher, and another opened a small auto repair shop. Their rock star dreams had ended quietly, back when cassette tapes still mattered. They didn't ask to be resurrected. And yet, there they were, memorialized in articles, dissected in podcasts, their creative decisions from 1984 judged under a 2024 microscope. Can you imagine having a teenage demo critiqued worldwide before your morning coffee? And here's where the horror part kicks in. Remember those weird analog horror videos from YouTube, Local 58, Gemini Home Entertainment, stuff that mixes nostalgia with dread? FEX's return felt uncannily like that. It was a band, once forgotten, flickering back into the feed like a corrupted VHS. Fans didn't just want to hear the song, they wanted lore, they wanted meaning. But Subways of Your Mind didn't come from a cryptic conspiracy. It came from 4 guys and a drum machine. And that disconnect between internet myth and real-life mundanity? That's what really rattled them. The psychological toll isn't hypothetical either. Michael Heydrich, one of the original members, described being completely floored by the Reddit message that identified the track. That was the moment the band realized this wasn't just a fluke. It was a global hunt they never signed up for. And as the views piled in and the articles ran wild, their discomfort only grew. This wasn't a moment of rediscovery. It was a breach. So now we have to ask, should forgotten artists stay forgotten? Or does the internet own their work now? Because if you dig deep enough, every dusty cassette and lost MP3 has a story behind it. But not all of those stories want to be told. And when the internet decides it's time to resurrect something, it rarely asks permission. That's the cost of curiosity in the digital age. Sometimes the treasure isn't yours to keep. It's not a stretch to say this case could change how we think about Lost Wave as a whole. Because for every mystery solved, there's a person at the other end, someone who might have written that song during a breakup or recorded it while crashing on a friend's couch. And while the internet may treat it like a puzzle, it was never meant to be one. That's what makes this story so haunting. Not the music, not even the mystery, but the realization that solving it might have hurt the people who created it. And think about this. What happens when one success sparks a dozen more hunts? The subways reveal didn't just end a mystery. It kicked off a movement. More users are now trawling old tapes, sampling static heavy demos, and uploading tracks from long-lost radio recordings, hoping to find the next viral ghost. But if we're not careful, that trend stops being homage and starts becoming digital trespassing. Because sure, it's thrilling to solve something the world has forgotten, but sometimes the world forgets it for a reason. So, where does this leave us? With a question that'll keep you up at night. Are we preserving culture? Or are we exhuming it without consent? And more importantly, when we hit play on a mystery track, are we listening or eavesdropping? Because FEX didn't ask for a second act. They got one anyway. And the internet, in all its curiosity and chaos, proved it can bring the past back to life. But it also reminded us that not every ghost wants to be resurrected. Some would rather stay, buried, humming quietly in the dark corners of a forgotten cassette drawer, out of tune, out of reach, and out of time. And just like that, the FEX mystery gave us both the thrill of digital discovery and the chill of crossing a line. We solved it, but at what cost? So next time you Shazam a song, ask yourself, what if the answer isn't a name, but a time bomb? Let me know in the comments what you think. Was this a triumph or a trespass?